Welcome to our podcast. I'm your host, Ari Hirschberg, and today I'm excited to be joined by a panel of experts in the field of service design. We have Martha Edwards, Service Design Lead at the Exchange Lab, Sarah Smythe, Acting Director of Service and Design for Government Digital Experience, and Kevin Ehman, Director of Strategic Design at Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. Together we will be discussing the Digital BC Livestream Policy to Pixels. Is design stalled? We will explore how our jurisdiction compares to others, such as Government UK, in terms of design maturity, acceptance, and organizational structure. We will also be discussing tips for empowering designers within an agile team, strategies for supporting long-term thinking within sprints, and examples of finished good design products for the public. We will also be examining the role of agile approach in breaking design inertia and the importance of learning across all disciplines as a foundation for making good service design decisions. Additionally, we'll be discussing strategies for communicating the benefits and ROI of design to senior leadership, moving beyond side of the desk projects and what to do when we're hitting a mental wall as a designer. So sit back, relax, and join us as we dive into the world of service design. Welcome to the show, Kevin, Sarah, and Martha.
Thanks,
Hi,
Ari.
Hey, Ari.
And with that, let's get right into it. How do we compare to other jurisdictions like the Government of UK in terms of design maturity, acceptance, and org structure?
So I can talk to that one because I've worked for a few different governments. I would say compared to other governments in Canada, like the federal government, we're pretty similar. We have sort of pockets of design, but not really a wider organizational strategy. But I'll talk a bit about the UK government because I worked there for a few years in government digital service. This was a few years ago, so I'm not totally sure how it is now. But compared to where we're at in BC government, I would say their design maturity is quite high. I say this because they have hundreds of designers, not to mention user researchers and content designers. So it's a really built up practice. They have multiple designers on each product team. So it's not just sort of like one person for a product team or a whole work area. It's multiple people working together. They have a lot of design leaders. Their communities of practice are very strong. Things like design systems aren't side of desks. They're things that are funded and treated like products. And they're really committed to working in the open. They're always blogging and sharing their progress and talking about the work that they do. So they're really seen as kind of a leader in terms of design in the government. And I think there's kind of a couple reasons for this. So one big reason is that they have a service standard, and not just a service standard, but accountability through an assessments process as well as spend controls. So basically, if you don't do user research and make design decisions based on the needs of your users, you might not get funding or permission to go live. So there's really a high level incentive for the teams there to really do design well and to build that capacity. Otherwise, they can't launch their services. And then also, the second thing I think is that there's a big culture of making things better, and it's kind of an expectation that everyone's going to contribute to communities. There was just this culture of working towards building design capacity across the organization. Like it was actually built into performance reviews, doing things like blogging and contributing to communities. So I would say they're quite a bit ahead of us in terms of design maturity, but I think that we're doing really excellent work and we're on our way to catching up to them eventually.
Are there any places that you've seen in government, the BC government, where we're catching up that you could talk about?
I would say our central team, so within citizen services, we have a really strong design culture in the Exchange Lab and government digital experience. We have a lot of designers working together. I think there's still a lot that we need to work on, such as not working in silos. But I think our central government design team is really strong and really doing excellent work.
And if you haven't heard of the work of the gov.uk, we'll have a link in the show notes for people to read in. Go ahead, Sarah.
I also just wanted to add, I think like the Digital Investment Office in the BC government has started to, make some great progress of incorporating design into their requirements for giving funding for digital products. And so that's something that's, I think, on the near horizon for both the Exchange Lab and GDX to look at how we can work more closely with them and make sure that the design standards that we want to see in our work are supported across the organization.
Thank you. Any tips for empowering designers within an agile team? How do you support long-term thinking within sprints?
Oh boy, should I try to dig into this one? Well, support on a product team in an agile environment needs to come from the product owner, who needs to elevate the role of design and have the work be truly design-led. But also it needs to be sort of a cultural norm or an ethic that's established by more senior leadership, the sponsors of the work, the key stakeholders. And generally, before you get into like the product space with a cross-functional team delivering stuff, you should have ideally done a pretty extensive amount of design research to inform the thing you're making. So design should already be the sort of normative way of doing things that everybody is stepping into in the product team configuration. Now, when I look at design and agile, I sort of break it out into two buckets, and I talked about this on the live stream a little bit. There's the foundational design piece, which precedes the initiation of the product team. That's the design exploration and the design discovery. But then that continues on through the work as well. Like if you're working in a complex service ecosystem, you might have a couple service designers who are just like figuring out where we're going. And that is really decoupled from the agile cadence. And that's that foundational research that helps build out like a bigger roadmap for what the product team is going to do. There's some prioritization work in there. A lot of figuring out like where we're at and where we need to go at a more meta level. But then within the design team, or within the product team, I should say, you have designers who are working in a more directional capacity. And they're going to be working in an agile cadence, trying to validate product decisions, trying to bring back data to the developers to make really good product level decisions. So there's a few different ways you can go about this. But generally, I think a successful strategy with designers in the agile cadence is working a little bit ahead of the product team. So they're taking out, the latest version of, your alpha or beta product, or they're taking out prototypes. Whatever it is that they're bringing to users, they're trying to get feedback on where the product is going or where it's at, and bringing that back and making directional decisions as such through that user testing, user engagement process that design is so adept at. So that's a really high level, I think, on how design works in a product environment. There's no one size fits all solution. It really depends on what it is you're working on and what kind of resources you have. But generally, there's sort of two arcs or two pace layers to design when it comes to product teams.
Martha.
I just wanted to say I agree with all of that. And maybe just drawing from my own experience. So in the 10 years I've been doing this job in government, there's only one time where I really felt that I could do design work effectively in 2-week sprints. And there were kind of 3 things that I think made this possible. So one is that, as Kevin mentioned, we were at the right stage to do this work. We already had a lot of foundational research, and we were very much in like a build and iterate stage. The other thing is that we had a big design team. So we had 2 user researchers. We had a user interface designer, we had a service designer, we had a content designer. So, we had a lot of people contributing to it. And, when you have that many people, it's easy to kind of design in 2-week sprints. And then the other thing is that we had a recruitment firm on retainer. So like we didn't actually have to do the work of finding users for our user testing. Like we could just sort of call someone and say, can you give us these users on this day? So it was really made easy for us to do that. And I think, I don't think I've I've seen any teams in the BC government that have all of those things in place to do it. So it's really hard to do unless you have all of that support. So if you're having trouble with that, then that's normal. And it's not you, it's the system.
And Martha, just for reference, how many people are usually designing on a team?
Do you mean in the BC government?
Yes.
It depends. It's usually, in my experience, it's usually 1 or 2 designers on a product team. Usually only one. Sometimes one will be spread across multiple product teams. But it can be different. I think in Sarah's team, they might have more designers working on a single project.
I just want to follow on to a couple of your notes, Martha. And design is generally best executed in pairs. So a designer who is in charge of the UX UI at the product level, who also needs to run user testing, is going to really struggle to execute across all of those things because they need more support. It's just too much to do in 2 or 3 weeks. And then, trying to get the user testing support from the product owner or a person from the program area, generally not a super successful strategy. In terms of the end users who you want to work with in that continuous improvement loop, that feedback loop, a recruitment firm is great. We have a lot of struggles paying for recruitment with a third party in government. A strategy that's worked really well for us in environment is to the folks you work with in the discovery phase, you make it explicit that you want to keep coming back to them over and over again through different stages of the development and delivery of the service. And you essentially get a little action group going with ideally a pretty broad swath of representation from your end users. And you go back to them, through each stage of the build to get that feedback. So it is kind of a recurring group of users who can give you that feedback and expect to be engaged in it. It saves you that recruitment churn as you roll on.
I feel like we could have a whole podcast episode on recruitment. There are so many things that we've learned over the years of what works and what's hard, and when you need to use a recruitment firm versus when you should go out into the field and do it yourself. I have a lot of thoughts on that. But I would like to go back to the point about designers working alone or working in pairs. I think when it's possible, and of course it's not always possible, it's great to have designers working at least 2 by 2. The workload alone, but I think even more importantly, any research that's done should not be done in isolation. And we need to have those ethical conversations, those methods conversations with more people than ourselves to know if the path that we've chosen, that we've laid out, truly is going to be the best one for the questions that we're asking. And it's really difficult to get to the right answer on your own. So from that alone, I think having pairs is important, and then also having a community of designers you can go and ask to kind of validate those assumptions as well is really important.
Thanks, everyone, for the thorough answer. Just the idea of the amount of people that could potentially be on a team for getting things done, I had never thought of that much. So that is potentially another conversation in the future. Can you provide some examples of finished good design products for the public?
Oh, heck yeah. By the time this podcast comes out, the new bcparks.ca will have been released in basically a full production state. And that is a fantastically end-user-driven designed information service that really helps round out BC Parks' core digital services. There's a long way to go in the better integration of those services, but the old info services site compared to this new one is night and day. It's a huge accomplishment by the Parks team in collaboration with some great vendor support as well, and really shows what can be done when design leads in complex service delivery environments.
We will put that link in the podcast note.
I have another example. During COVID, GDX, or my division government digital experience, we worked very closely with the Ministry of Health and Service BC on a number of different communications channels that were providing the messaging that BC government wanted to give to the public around vaccinations especially, but other things related to COVID too. And through service design, design research, and a lot of coordinating, we made sure that all the communications across web, chatbot, the call center, all of those scripts and all the comms were lined up and consistent. One thing that we did learn, though, through our design research was that a lot of folks were still looking for paper-based information, or maybe web wasn't the easiest thing for them to go to. And so our designers identified this need through their research and then co-designed, prototyped, tested, creating some actual paper pamphlets, postcards that talked about how parents could get their children vaccinated and addressed some of the most concerning things for them that we surfaced through our research. And we were able to share those postcards across BC through different distribution channels like libraries and pharmacies, and have them translated into a few different languages as well.
That must have been a huge, huge project.
It was a long project, and we didn't know we were going to create those printed materials when we first started. It really surfaced out of the research that it was a need.
Can the panel speak to the importance of learning across all the disciplines as a foundation for making good service design decisions?
Ooh, this is a good question.
Who wants it?
I mean, I'm happy to reveal myself here in that I actually don't think you need to be an expert at a bunch of different areas of practice to be a good service designer. I think that I have been a pretty decent service designer, and I have no formal design background. I don't push pixels. I'm not a UI designer. I understand what good practice looks like when it comes to UX, UI. And I've certainly designed a lot of wireframes and roughed out interfaces at the prototype and sort of medium fidelity level. But I don't front end code, I don't get into Figma and push out a prod ready interface. I think service design is more about strategic and systems thinking. It's about being a really solid researcher and having really great synthesis skills, being able to move from analysis to synthesis, being able to propose courses of action. I think folks who come from social sciences background have just as much, or even computer sciences background, other architecture. There's a lot of different ways you can be a great service designer without a formal design education in one specific area of practice or a bunch of areas of practice. I think it really is more about an orientation and a mindset and some perhaps deeper innate skills to think in systemic ways than it is about formal training or the accumulation of methods, expertise, and stuff like that.
I really like how you broke that down.
Yeah, I think that was really thoughtful, Kevin. I think, thinking about the disciplines, I'm not sure what disciplines maybe this question asker was really meaning, but for me, when I hear disciplines, I think about lean, I think about development, I think about policy, I think about behavioral science. And what does service design look like in collaboration with those disciplines? I think design is everyone's responsibility. We're all designing services in government all the time. And so not everyone needs to be a service designer to do that. But service design needs those other disciplines in order to make the designs that they create come to life. Design lives and dies at implementation. And so if we can't align it with the policy and with development, then we won't see the things we dream up for, our research tells us come to life. So I think that's really important. Design's for everyone, not just service designers.
Yeah, when I returned back to government 6 years ago, I was excited to see that service design was in government.
Yeah, we're here. We're here.
Any other thoughts on that question? Okay. What are good strategies or rationales to help senior leadership to understanding the benefits of return of investment of design?
So one of the easiest ways that I frame this is it's about reducing risk. So when you have a really deep understanding of who your users are and what they need and what will work for them, then it's really easy to avoid building the wrong thing and wasting everybody's time and money. And then in terms of money, that can be a harder sell because design sometimes requires an upfront investment in terms of hiring people and building capacity. But I've been thinking a lot about the ways that you can show evidence of the cost savings. So, for example, I was recently looking for some impact metrics of different service design initiatives in the BC government, and I came across this piece of work that GDX did with health to improve the application for the medical services plan. And they had collected some metrics that showed that their new design actually reduced the error rate on the application form from 30% to less than 1%. And when you look at that, it's really easy to calculate big savings in terms of people's time, the time that staff would spend fixing errors or, taking calls from people who aren't getting their application through and so on. Sometimes we have to dig a little bit to find that evidence, but it does exist there.
I think a good service design project can start with trying to establish some baseline data. Like if the data doesn't exist already, you need to make sure that you start collecting it. And so if that data isn't available, it can be trickier to do that return on investment. So start collecting data. That's step one.
That's really great advice and a step that a lot of people skip.
Yes.
Especially in areas where no data has traditionally existed. Like a lot of our services actually have no real analytics or metrics program associated with them, which is sometimes shocking to discover. But yeah, you can't sell the investment on what you can't measure, for sure.
So how do we move beyond the side of the desk project expectation that seems to be everywhere to the path of this is an important initiative that is needed and will increase the overall tools and workspace WES results? And WES is a government term for something we survey every few years.
Workplace Environment Survey.
Thank you.
I would say we're not really there yet because the things that are important to design, such as design community and design systems, those are actually side of desk things. So we haven't really solved that yet, but we are working on it. But I was talking recently, and I think Ari, you were on the call. We were talking to Beth Fox from the Canadian Digital Service, and she mentioned something that's kind of stuck in my mind, which is that it's really helpful to frame side of desk work from the perspective of not what does it do, but what problem does it solve for the organization. And so I've been thinking about all of the side of desk work that I do from that perspective. And so I was thinking about the problem of duplication of work. So how many teams are spending time and money doing something that another team has already done, such as, creating a design pattern or a form that is really similar to something else. And, if you think of the huge amount of money that we're wasting by each doing all of that work in silos and never talking to each other, it's huge. So, so that's something that I'm doing. I'm starting to think of it as like, what problems does this side of desk work solve?
I mean, there's even more side of the desk work, I think, out in ministry land. Corporate enjoys a certain level of resourcing, I think, for design or development and for lots of good reasons, for sure. But I think when it comes to trying to create really fulsome solutions and practice supports, when it comes down to the ministry level, it's for example, we're kind of 2 years almost into having a really sort of well-defined design-led approach in environment, and we're only now just starting to like meet as a group and like talk about how we practice, what good looks like, how we support each other, because we've just been like scrambling to do the work for so long. And now we finally, I think, have got like a bit more of a sustainable rhythm, and we're able to come together, create that time and space to like build shared assets and like build documentation, all of these things that really like create efficiencies, reduce overlap and redundancy, consistify the practice. But yeah, you know, we have to be scrappy about it, and we have to be proactive about it.
To you, Martha, like your human-centered design group off the side of your desk is a great example. Just having people talking to each other and hearing that all the similarities of our work, that we can, if we just talk to each other, the time alone for that is a huge saver.
Yeah, you're a legend for that, Martha.
Did you have a thought, Sarah, on this?
Yeah, I think Martha and Kevin have said a lot of what I would say too, that opening the space to conversation and communication is the start. I think we also need to work in the open and have shared systems and tools for sharing information, not just across teams or divisions, but across our whole organization. And we don't really have that yet. Like, we don't have a platform where we can necessarily share like a full design system. So web pages or forms don't have to be created from scratch every time. So those are things that still need to be built, and I think they need corporate support. And so there are things we're thinking a lot about, I know, at GDX, and they need leadership to create that space for it, because they shouldn't live on the side of people's desks anymore as we see design grow and the demand for it grow.
Yeah, I want to like loop back to one of the first questions around like the state of design maturity. Maybe it was the first question. And I think like in BC, the growth of design and the maturity of the practice, it's actually been around for quite a while, like well over a decade as like a formally established thing, like service design, having a documented practice. But it has been scaling so incrementally. Whereas like a jurisdiction like Alberta had no design practice a decade ago. But now the investment in growing that across the organization is exponential compared to us. The positions, the budget, the structure, all of those things, is just like it's exploded. Now there's a lot of challenges that come along with that as well, for sure. And I think folks practicing in Alberta would probably have a lot of critique about, you know, the way it's gone. That's inevitable. But yeah, it's just been a real slow burn here. And because of that, I don't think we've really caught up with like other sort of digital era practice areas in terms of the resourcing required to have good communities of practice and like repositories and tooling and all those things.
So what would you suggest for designers hitting a mental wall? Example, lack of support, lack of tools, lack of progress.
One thing that I say, I you know, as someone who is kind of the figurehead for the design community, I get a lot of people reaching out to me and, you know, kind of saying like, oh, you know, I feel like I'm not having a lot of impact. And something that I say to them is that, you know, the ask of service design and government is we're here to change how government works. And that's really difficult. It's maybe even impossible. So I just always try and remind people to be kind to yourself and realize that, you know, it's not your fault that things aren't changing, or that you feel like you're having a little impact, because you are having impact, and you know, it's not moving as fast as you'd like, and that's not your fault. That's the system that we're in. I think another thing that's been really helpful for me in my time as a public servant is realizing that government is a long game. Change is slow. You have to be really patient. It takes time to get things off the ground. And, you know, one thing that I discovered recently that really kind of changed my perspective is that a few years ago, I did this, what I thought was really impactful research, and at the time on the product team I was on, it really went nowhere. Like we weren't really set up to actually change the decision that had already been made. So it just kind of died and sat there. And then I found out sort of a few months ago that it was actually being picked up again and a new team was working on it. And so, that's really inspiring to me to know that, even if something doesn't go your way right now, it doesn't mean that it's not going to in the future.
Yeah, this is my second term, like I was saying, in government, and I didn't think of it that way as long game when I was in my 20s, but then I had some people explain it to me, and it just didn't mind shift.
We're planting seeds, and then hopefully someone comes by and waters them a little bit.
I think like design exercises can often just be the thin edge of the wedge, right? Like lately I've been talking about design as a Trojan horse sometimes. We're sent in to ostensibly solve like a service interaction level problem. But what you might discover along the way is that, to solve for causes and not effects, you've got to pull apart like the whole program design. And that's not really your remit as a designer, right? Like that's going to involve everyone, literally everyone involved, like senior decision makers, the folks who spun up the program, who own the policy, all of that. That might set off like a multi-year endeavor. So yeah, you might not get to see the impacts of your work in the short term, but it can catalyze bigger change. Or, like Martha was just saying, like something that gets shelved because it's poor timing or like there's circumstance beyond your control, it can get picked up again. So we have to be resolute, I think, and see the bigger picture in which we operate and do a little bit of healthy compartmentalization as well.
Yeah. One thing I want to add to that is that if there are any designers out there feeling that way, please get in touch with our community. There's lots of people, including myself, who are willing to be mentors and coaches for people who feel alone or who feel like they're not having the impact they would like.
Took the words out of my mouth, Martha. Yeah, like it's to be a single designer on a product, I think that's really hard. And like Martha said, like it's a lot of responsibility you might feel is weighing on your shoulders, and it doesn't have to be all on you. So absolutely reach out to the design community. And even within our community, there might be channels or networks through which we'll be able to point you in the direction of a design champion in your area that can help lift up what you're doing so you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, it's great to have communities like this because in any big organization, if you're working alone in any position, you need to have your community to help you build you up because there's always good days and there's always days that you need that team. Okay, final thoughts. Does anyone have any final thoughts they'd like to share? We have covered a lot.
I mean, I think it's a good metric that design's even getting this airtime, right? Like that we're here having this discussion. So big thanks to you, Ari, for hosting us on the Digital BC call and then now on the pod. Like, yeah, it's good. It's a good signal for where design is at and the interest in design and the momentum. Lots of positive signals in the BC government right now. And it's an exciting time to be a designer here, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like there's some wind of change in our sails right now. Like something's catalyzing some new things happening. So this podcast is probably a bit of that. So appreciate it. I think it's important maybe just to take a moment to acknowledge all the great design leadership that's come before the three of us sitting in this room today. This work isn't easy, and a lot of amazing people have been doing really good work for a long time and have set a really strong history of good design in BC government. And now we have an opportunity to kind of level that up across the organization. So thanks to them for setting us up.
Pleasure. Thank you all for coming. I've been wanting to have design on for a while. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kevin, for taking the time to share your thoughts. To the listeners, I hope you enjoyed Policy to Pixels as Design Stalled. You can connect with me at ari.hirschberg@gov.bc.ca or click the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening.